My phone lit up at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. One missed call. I set it face down and went back to sleep. By 2 a.m., 17. By morning, 52. 52 missed calls from a family I hadn't spoken to in 8 years. 8 years of silence. 8 years of building a life they told everyone I was too broken to build. 8 years of them telling our entire hometown that I was unstable, that I'd had some kind of breakdown, that they were worried sick about me. 52 calls. 0 voicemails that said the words "I'm sorry." Every single one said the same 2 words. And those 2 words told me everything I needed to know about why they were really calling. My name is Cassidy Monroe. I'm 31 years old. I live in Austin, Texas, in an apartment I own, with a career I built from nothing and a found family that has never once made me feel like a guest in my own life. And I need to tell you what happened, because if you've ever been the person your family blamed for everything, if you've ever been the one who cleaned up while everyone else celebrated, if you've ever sat at a table surrounded by people who share your blood and felt completely, utterly alone, this story is yours too. Let me take you back to Christmas Eve, 2016. Brenham, Texas. Population just under 17,000. The kind of small town where the high school football coach gets more local news coverage than the city council, where everybody has a nickname, and where gossip doesn't just travel, it migrates, like birds, finding somewhere warm to settle every single winter. Christmas at the Monroe house meant 3 things: my grandmother Loretta's cast-iron cornbread on the stove, my Uncle Dale already 2 beers deep by 4 o'clock, and my mother, Carol Monroe, standing at the center of every room like a planet that everything else had to orbit or crash into. I was 22. I'd been working 2 jobs since I turned 18 days at a veterinary clinic as a vet tech assistant, evenings at a sports bar called Buckhorn on the edge of town. I was living in a rented room above a flower shop on Main Street, paying $3.50 a month, eating a lot of rice and a lot of canned soup, and slowly, painstakingly saving toward a goal that felt embarrassing to say out loud in my family's house. I wanted to go to college. Not just any college. I'd been accepted quietly, without telling anyone, because telling anyone meant inviting opinions I hadn't asked for into the University of Texas at Austin. Business administration. Night program. It would take me longer than a traditional 4-year track. It would cost money I barely had. But I had a plan, and I had a scholarship offer, and I had something my family had spent years trying to convince me I didn't have. A future. My older brother, Travis, had just closed on his 3rd rental property at 27. My mother toasted him at dinner with a glass of Chardonnay that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Travis is going to own half of Brenham by 40. Everyone laughed. Everyone clinked. Travis tilted his head the way he always did when he was letting a compliment land. My younger sister, Amber, had just gotten promoted at the insurance company where she worked. She was 20, which meant she'd started straight out of high school and climbed fast. My mother called her a natural. The table agreed. Amber smiled and didn't correct the record, didn't mention that her manager was our cousin Shane's wife, or that the promotion was a title change without a raise. Details didn't matter. The story mattered. And then there was me. I was wallpaper. Functional wallpaper. I'd driven my grandmother to her cardiology appointment that morning, picked up the sweet potato casserole from the bakery because my mother forgot to order it, set the table, made the rolls from scratch because Amber burned the first batch. But at the actual dinner and the actual conversation, I was a gap in the room. A space where a person should be. I didn't resent my brother and sister for succeeding. I want to be clear about that, because I've spent a lot of therapy dollars working through exactly this. I didn't resent them. What I resented was the implication, never stated, always understood that their success was deserved and mine was impossible. That Travis was building an empire because he was exceptional, and I was working 2 jobs because I was failing. My grandmother Loretta was the only one who ever asked me direct questions. Not rhetorical ones wrapped in concern. Actual questions. Cassidy, what are you reading lately? Cassidy, what's your plan? Cassidy, what do you want? She asked me that last one so often I'd started to think of it as my name. Cassidy, what do you want? I knew what I wanted. I just hadn't said it yet. After dinner, when the dishes were stacked and the men had retreated to the living room and my mother and Amber were talking about Amber's new apartment, I sat down next to Loretta at the kitchen table. She was 81. She had arthritis in both hands that she refused to complain about, and she made the best pie crust I've ever tasted in my life. And she told me once that she regretted not becoming a nurse because she had let her mother talk her out of it. Nana, I said. I got into UT Austin. She put her coffee cup down, looked at me with those dark brown eyes that always made me feel like she was reading something behind my face. Tell me everything, she said. I told her. The acceptance letter, the scholarship, the business program, the night classes, the plan to keep working while I studied because I wasn't going to take on debt I couldn't manage. She listened to every word without interrupting. When I finished, she reached across the table and put both arthritic hands over mine. Don't you let a single person in this house talk you out of it, she said. Not one. I should have listened to what she was really warning me about. Because the next morning, Christmas Day, I made the mistake of telling my mother. I don't know exactly what I expected. I think, somewhere underneath the armor I'd been building since childhood, I still had this small, naive hope that she'd be proud of me. That she'd say, Cassidy, that's wonderful. That she'd call my name at dinner the way she called Travis's. What she said instead was this. Austin? You can't afford Austin. And a night program? That's not a real degree. That's what people do when they don't actually qualify for the real thing. I told her about the scholarship. She told me scholarships have hidden requirements and I'd probably lose it by the 2nd semester. I told her I had a plan. She told me plans were what people made before reality hit them. I told her I'd already been accepted. She put her coffee cup down and looked at me with an expression I'd been seeing my whole life, not anger, exactly. Something colder than anger. Something that felt like the deliberate extinguishing of something small and warm. Do what you want, she said. But don't come back here when it falls apart. Travis walked in halfway through, heard the tail end of it. He looked at me with something that wasn't quite pity and wasn't quite contempt and landed somewhere in the uncomfortable middle. You sure about this, Cass? He said. Like my own ambition was a gamble he was too smart to take. I didn't answer him. I walked back to my rented room above the flower shop, sat on my twin bed, and looked at the acceptance letter I'd printed out and kept in a folder under my mattress. And I made a decision. I was going to Austin. And I was going to stop asking this family for permission to exist. I need to stop here for a second and tell you something about my grandmother Loretta's will. Because the will is part of this story. And you need to understand it before everything else makes sense. Loretta Monroe, my father's mother, had a small life insurance policy that she'd been paying into since 1978. $40 a month for 38 years. The policy had grown. When she revised her will in 2014, 2 years before the Christmas I just described, she divided it into 4 equal parts. My father, Raymond. My Aunt Deborah. My Uncle Phil. And me. Not Travis. Not Amber. Not my mother Carol. Me. I didn't know this at Christmas 2016. I wouldn't find out until much later. But my mother knew. She'd known for 2 years. And I think I've thought about this a lot in therapy, and I think That what I saw in her face when I told her about UT Austin wasn't just dismissal. It was preemptive control. Because if I left Brenham, if I actually built something, then the money my grandmother had set aside for me would go to someone she could no longer manage. And Carol Monroe did not like things she could not manage. I left for Austin on January 8th, 2017. The start of the spring semester. I didn't tell anyone except Loretta. She hugged me at her front door, pressed her cheek against mine. She smelled like talcum powder and Folgers and something ancient and steady, like Riverstone, and she said 4 words into my hair. "I'm proud of you." It was the last time I saw her. Austin in January is cold in a way that Texans will tell you isn't real cold, but feels real enough when you're sleeping in a hostel because your first paycheck hasn't cleared and the cheapest room you could find is $62 a night, and you've done the math 17 times and it still barely works. I had $412 in my checking account. A duffel bag, 1 suitcase, a laptop I'd bought refurbished from a guy in Waco for $280, and the printed out acceptance letter in my folder. I did not have my family. I found a room within my first week. A shared house in East Austin, 4 bedrooms, 3 other tenants, a landlord who accepted cash for the deposit if you could front first and last. I fronted it. It left me with $109 and a move-in date of January 15th and a feeling that was somewhere between terror and something I didn't have a name for yet. I know now that the nameless feeling was freedom. My first job in Austin was at a coffee shop called Perla's on South Congress. $6.15 an hour plus tips, open at 7, I was there by 6:30. I worked the morning shift, went straight to class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, studied on weeknights at the library on 21st Street because it was open until midnight and the Wi-Fi was free. I didn't have a social life. I didn't have money for one. I ate lunch from the coffee shop, whatever was going stale before noon, and cooked dinner in the shared house kitchen every night for my roommates and myself because buying in bulk was cheaper than buying single portions and cooking for 4 cost almost as much as cooking for 1. I was 22 years old and I was so profoundly alone that sometimes I'd sit on my twin bed in that East Austin house and count the things I was grateful for just to keep the silence from getting too big. 1, I got in. 2, I'm here. 3, nobody is telling me who I'm allowed to be today. That last one. Every single night, that one made the list. Because here's what leaving your family really leaving, the kind of leaving where you don't call and they don't call and the silence stretches into weeks and then months. What nobody tells you about that kind of leaving is that the absence of noise is its own kind of noise. You don't miss the cruelty. You miss the familiarity of it. You miss knowing what shape the pain is going to take today. What you don't expect is how loud the quiet is when the cruelty is gone. 3 months into Austin, I called my grandmother. Loretta answered on the second ring. She always answered on the second ring. Cassidy, tell me everything. I told her. Coffee shop. East Austin house. Spring semester, 2 classes, a professor named Dr. Eileen Sosa who told me in office hours that I had unusually clear analytical instincts, and I'd spent the rest of the day trying to hold that sentence somewhere safe. Loretta listened with the kind of attention that most people only give to things they're afraid of losing. When I finished, she said, "Your mother's been talking." I didn't ask what she'd been saying. I think I already knew. What kind of talking? The kind where she tells Brenham Baptist that you had a breakdown, that you ran off impulsive, that she tried to stop you. A pause. The Henderson's daughter apparently asked after you at the church potluck. I was quiet for a moment. And what did you tell her? I told her you were exactly where you were supposed to be. She paused again. Cassidy, I need you to know something. Whatever happens, whatever your mother tells people, there are things I've put in place. Things that are yours. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I thought she was talking about her china. Or maybe the sapphire earrings she'd worn to every significant event of her life. I said, Nana, I don't need things. I just need you to know I'm okay. She said, I know you're okay. You've always been the okay one. That's why they resented you. It was the most honest thing anyone in my family had ever said to me out loud. I didn't know what to do with it. So I just sat there on my twin bed in East Austin, holding my phone, while my grandmother breathed on the other end of the line. And the city moved outside my window with all its noise, and its indifference, and its absolute refusal to know or care who Carol Monroe thought her daughter was. It was, I realized later, the beginning of something. By fall semester of 2017, I'd moved to a better job. A small consulting firm called Straight Advisory on the east side, 3 employees, operated out of a converted bungalow on Cesar Chavez. They worked with small businesses and nonprofits on financial planning and grant development. The owner, a woman named Paulina Dees, found my resume on a job board and called me in on a Thursday afternoon. She asked me to walk her through how I'd handled the coffee shop's daily drawer reconciliation at the end of shift. I told her. She asked me what I noticed about her office. I said the file system looked like it hadn't been reorganized since 2014. The intake forms had duplicate fields that were creating data entry inefficiencies, and the plant on the windowsill was overwatered and going to die within 2 weeks. She hired me on the spot. $14 an hour. 25 hours a week. Flexible schedule around my classes. You're going to tell me things I don't want to hear, Pauline said, and I'm going to need you to do it anyway. I can do that, I said. That was the beginning of my real education. Not the degree, though the degree mattered. The real education was Paulina Dees, who operated with the precision of someone who had built everything herself and had zero patience for any system that didn't earn its place. She asked me questions constantly. Not softballs. Questions with teeth. Why did you restructure this client's budget this way instead of that way? What are you assuming here that might be wrong? If this grant falls through, what's the backup? What's the backup to the backup? Nobody in my family had ever asked me questions like that. Questions that assumed I was capable of having the answers. I got better at having the answers. 8 months after I left Brenham, my mother emailed me. I know you're doing your thing out there. I hope you realize what you're giving up. Your brother's engagement party is in March, and it would mean a lot to the family if you came back. Don't make this about you. I read it 4 times. Then I closed my laptop and didn't respond. 3 weeks later, Travis texted me, Mom says you're not coming to the party. Real mature, Cass. Amber texted, I don't know why you're doing this to the family. I was 23 years old, working 25 hours a week at a consulting firm, taking 2 night classes, paying my own rent, eating dinner I cooked myself. And I was doing this to the family by not attending a party in a town I'd left because the alternative was slowly disappearing inside a version of myself that didn't actually exist. I didn't go to the party. I did not reach out. Not for Travis's engagement, not for Amber's birthday, not for my parents' anniversary, not for any of the holidays that first year. I let the silence be the answer because I didn't have words for what I was doing that wouldn't have been used against me. Silence is a thing people use as evidence of guilt when you're the family scapegoat. The fact that you're not defending yourself becomes proof that you're guilty. So you can't win either way. You can respond and be called dramatic. Or you can stay quiet and be called cold. I chose cold. Cold doesn't drain you the same way. In March of 2018, my grandmother Loretta had a stroke. A small one, what the doctors called a TIA, a transient ischemic attack. She was home within 48 hours. But when I called her the following week, something in her voice had changed. Not her mind. Her mind was sharp as it ever was. But there was a fragility underneath the sharpness that hadn't been there before, something that made me understand, the way you understand things you're not ready to understand, that time was contracting. Cassidy, she said, I need you to know that I told my lawyer to contact you directly. Not through your parents. Through you. Do you understand what I mean? I said I did. His name is Robert Fenwick. He's in Brenham. You can find him. I wrote the name down. I didn't ask more questions because I could hear the effort it was taking her to speak, and I didn't want to spend her energy on my questions when what I really wanted was just to hear her breathe. We talked for 40 minutes about everything except the obvious thing. She told me about a documentary she'd watched about hummingbirds. She told me the corner store had started selling those lemon cookies she liked, the Italian ones in the green tin. She told me she'd been reading a lot lately, mostly novels, because at my age you stop caring about nonfiction and you start caring about stories. When we said goodbye, she said, I love you and I'm proud of you and none of the rest of it matters. She died 6 weeks later. In her sleep. May 14th, 2018. Nobody called me. I found out from a Facebook post my Uncle Phil made. A photo of Loretta at Christmas, 2015. We lost an angel today. Mama, you're with Jesus now. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a Whole Foods in Austin and read that post for 5 minutes straight. Not because I was absorbing new information. Because I was trying to understand how a family decides not to call someone when their grandmother dies. What the conversation must have looked like. Who said don't bother calling Cassidy and who nodded and who didn't object. I called Robert Fenwick, the lawyer, the next morning. He answered like he'd been waiting for my call. He probably had. Miss Monroe, he said, I'm very sorry for your loss. I have some information for you when you're ready. I want to pause the story here because what I'm about to tell you is the piece that changes everything. The piece that, when I look back, I understand as the real fault line, the place where what I thought was happening and what was actually happening split completely apart. Loretta Monroe had left me $42,000. Not a trinket. Not the china. Not the sapphire earrings, though those were left to me separately, in a little velvet pouch that Robert Fenwick mailed to my Austin address. $42,000. Life insurance policy, 38 years of premiums, properly maintained, properly structured, left entirely to me in a will that had been notarized and witnessed and filed with the county clerk in February 2014. Robert Fenwick was very calm and very precise as he explained this to me. He'd been Loretta's attorney for 20 years. He'd helped her draft the will. He'd watched her make deliberate choices about who got what and why, and he was under strict instructions to contact me directly at my last known address, which Loretta had updated every time I moved because she'd been keeping track, and to transfer the funds within 30 days of her death. There was one problem. She'd contacted him the day after Loretta died, before I even knew Loretta had died, and she'd told him that I was not of sound mind, that I had a history of erratic behavior, that I had abandoned the family and was likely using drugs, and that any inheritance left to me should be placed in a trust administered by my parents until I demonstrated stability. Robert Fenwick told me all of this. Calmly. With the practiced steadiness of a man who had seen families do ugly things to each other's money for 20 years. He also told me that none of it mattered, because the will was valid. The designation was clear. And the only thing my mother had succeeded in doing was making him extremely thorough in his documentation. The money transferred to my account on June 2nd, 2018. I sat in my car outside the bank in Austin and stared at my account balance until the numbers stopped looking real. And then I thought about Loretta, pressing her arthritic hands over mine at that kitchen table at Christmas. Don't you let a single person in this house talk you out of it. She wasn't just talking about UT Austin. She was talking about all of it. She had been building me an escape hatch for years, quietly, without fanfare, without telling anyone who might block it. She knew exactly what she was doing. She just couldn't say it out loud under my mother's roof. I used $14,000 of that $42,000 to pay off the remaining tuition I owed on my business degree. I put $20,000 in a high-yield savings account and left it there. I used $6,000 to move into my own apartment for the first time, a one-bedroom in South Austin, ground floor, with a small patch of yard where I immediately planted 3 tomato plants that mostly survived. I kept the remaining $2,000 as a cushion. My mother did not contact me about the inheritance. I think she assumed she'd blocked it. I think the silence from Robert Fenwick's office felt to her like a confirmation that she'd won. I never corrected the misunderstanding. Some information is safest when your enemy doesn't know you have it. Year 3 in Austin. I graduated in December 2019. Not a full cap and gown ceremony. I did the December commencement, which is a smaller thing, quieter, more chairs than people, but it counts exactly the same on the diploma. Paulina Dees sat in the audience in a red blazer and cried. I'm not exaggerating. She brought flowers. White daisies in a paper cone, the kind they sell at HB. She handed them to me in the parking lot afterward and said, "You know I'm going to have to give you more responsibility now." I said, "You were going to do that anyway." She laughed. She wasn't wrong. Strata Advisory had grown. We'd added 2 employees. We'd taken on larger clients, a regional food bank, a minority-owned business incubator, 2 city council districts that needed grant writing support. I had graduated from financial data entry to actually running client strategy sessions. I was 25 years old and I was sitting across from executive directors and city officials and being asked for my opinion. And the fact that I'd grown up in a house where my opinion was irrelevant felt like something from a different dimension entirely. I met Priya Subramanian at a nonprofit networking event in January 2020. She was consulting for a health equity organization, had a master's in public policy from Georgetown, and a laugh that arrived before she did. We connected the way you connect with someone who has done the same kind of building you've done, not easily, not accidentally, but intentionally. Brick by deliberate brick. She was the first person I told the whole truth to. We were eating barbecue at a place on 6th Street, 3 weeks into knowing each other, and she asked why I never mentioned family. Not as a probe, just as an observation. You talk about your boss, your roommates, your professors. You never talk about family. I told her all of it. The Christmas table. The dismissal. The will. The 2 years of my mother telling Brennan Baptist I'd had a breakdown. The 52 missed calls. No, wait. That part hadn't happened yet. I told her the part that had already happened. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she looked at me for a long moment. My parents told my cousins I was studying abroad, she said. For 6 years. While I was actually living with my girlfriend. We sat with that for a while. Then we ordered another round of drinks and changed the subject entirely, the way you can with someone who understands that not every wound requires extended examination. Sometimes you just need to know someone else has one too. Priya became my person in Austin. My emergency contact, my Sunday plans, the dishwasher is making a weird noise at 11 p.m. phone call. The family I was building one deliberate choice at a time. By 2022, I had a title I'd never let myself imagine when I was washing coffee cups at Perla's at 6 in the morning. Director of Strategic Operations. Strata Advisory. We'd grown to 31 employees. We had offices in Austin and San Antonio. We'd been awarded a federal community development grant that put us on the national radar. I was 28 years old. I drove a used Toyota Camry, lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Mueller neighborhood that I'd bought, With a combination of savings and a mortgage, I'd qualified for entirely on my own income. The Regional Business Journal did a feature in the spring. Women under 30 shaping Texas community development. My photo, my title, my story. The sanitized version started as a coffee shop employee, worked her way through night school, rose to director. Professional. Clean. The version that leaves out everything that actually happened. I didn't Google my family. I didn't check social media. I didn't drive through Brenham on the way to anything. I had let them go with the kind of completeness that people who've never had to do it tend to call cold. It's not cold. It's surgery. Performed without anesthesia. On yourself. Necessary. For 5 years, they let me go, too. Not one call, not one letter, not one message through a mutual contact. My mother told Brenham what she needed to tell Brenham, and Brenham believed her, and nobody drove to Austin to check. Not once. If you're still with me, and I hope you are, hit the like button before we go further, because this is the part where everything shifts, and I want you to stay close. 6 months before the 52 calls, something happened. I got an email at my work address. My professional email, the one on our firm's website. The subject line said, "Message from your Aunt Deborah. Please open." Deborah was my father's sister. My grandmother Loretta's daughter. Growing up, she was the one who remembered birthdays, who made sweet tea with real sugar, who once drove 40 miles in a hailstorm to bring me a stuffed animal when I was 8 and had my tonsils out because nobody else thought to. She had watched everything that happened at every family gathering and said nothing, the way a lot of good people say nothing when the loudest person in the room is the one they're afraid of. The email was 4 paragraphs. Short, precise, no warm-up. Cassidy, I owe you an apology that is years overdue. I watched what happened to you in that family, and I was a coward. I told myself I was keeping the peace. What I was really doing was keeping my comfort. She told me that my mother had been telling anyone who would listen that I had abandoned the family. She told me that the Brenham First Baptist prayer chain had prayed for me, by name, every Sunday for 2 years, based on my mother's implication that I was in some kind of crisis facility. She told me that when the Business Journal article came out, she'd read it and sat in her car and cried for 45 minutes. Then she told me something else. Your mother filed a challenge to Mama's will after it was executed. You may not know this. She hired her own attorney. Robert Fenwick handled it, and he never told you because by the time she filed, the funds had already transferred and there was nothing to challenge. But I thought you should know she tried. I sat with that email for 3 days before I replied. When I did, I said, "Thank you for telling me. I need time before I can promise anything beyond this conversation. But thank you." She wrote back within an hour, "Take whatever time you need. I'll be here." 3 months after Deborah's email, I was invited to speak at something that made my stomach drop when I read the details. Pauline forwarded me an inquiry that had come through our firm's website. A civic organization in Brenham, Texas, the Brazos County Community Forward Initiative, was hosting an annual fundraising gala. They wanted a keynote speaker, someone in community development, someone with ties to small-town Texas, someone who had built something. Pauline sent it with a single line, "You grew up near there, right? You'd be perfect." I already said yes. I read that email 5 times. I hadn't told Pauline the name of my hometown. She didn't know my family. She didn't know that my mother was on the planning committee for half the civic events in Brenham. She didn't know any of it. She just saw a professional opportunity that matched my background and committed me to it, with the cheerful certainty of someone who doesn't know they've just handed you a grenade. I almost emailed back and said I couldn't make it. I thought about Loretta pressing her hands over mine. Don't let anyone in this house talk you out of it. I wrote back to Pauline, confirmed. I'll prep the materials. Then I texted Deborah. I'm going to be the keynote speaker at the Community Forward Gala. March 14th. Does my mother know it's in Brenham? Her reply came in 90 seconds. Not yet. She's on the decoration committee. Cassidy, be ready. 2 weeks before the gala, my phone started ringing. It didn't start with 52 calls. That came later. It started with one on a Monday afternoon from a number I didn't recognize, but a 979 area code, Brenham. I let it go to voicemail. No message. I found out later exactly what had happened. Deborah told me in pieces over the following weeks, the way you tell someone a building has collapsed, not all at once, but room by room. My sister Amber had been struggling. She'd been quietly struggling for 2 years, though the family's version of the story didn't include the word struggling because in the Monroe family's lexicon, struggling was something that happened to other people or to Cassidy. Because Cassidy had always been the dramatic one. What was actually happening? Amber's marketing coordinator job had disappeared in a round of layoffs in early 2023. She'd been unemployed for 14 months. She'd burned through her savings. Her boyfriend, Derek, had moved out. She owed 6 months of back rent on a condo she could no longer afford, and the management company had filed eviction proceedings. She needed a cosigner on an emergency loan. A real one. Someone with income, credit history, and a documented employment record. Travis had leveraged his rental properties past his debt ceiling. My mother's credit score was, according to Deborah, not something Carol likes to talk about. My father, Raymond, had taken early retirement and was living on a fixed income and a stubbornness about asking for help that was the one characteristic I'd genuinely inherited from him. And then someone, Amber, I think, or maybe Travis, typed my name into Google. Business Journal. LinkedIn. Our firm's website. A conference speaker bio from a national nonprofit summit. A press release from the City of Austin thanking Strata Advisory for their work on the East Austin Small Business Incubation Project. Deborah told me later that the silence in the room when they found it was the kind that comes before something breaks. She's a director? She owns a house? She's been in the paper? Carol Monroe's response, according to Deborah, was not pride. It was not relief. It was a 15-minute silence followed by, well, she's always been good at making herself look good. The calls started that night. I was in the middle of a team debrief with 4 of my analysts when the first call came in. I didn't answer. I set my phone to vibrate. By the time the meeting ended, an hour and 20 minutes, I had 12 missed calls. By 9 p.m., 31. By midnight, 44. By 6 a.m. when I woke up to make coffee, 52. All from Texas area codes. Some from numbers I recognized immediately. Some I had to look up. I made coffee. I sat down at my kitchen table. I listened to every single voicemail before I moved from that chair. I want to walk you through them. Not all 52, most of them were hang-ups or repetitions. But the ones that actually said something. Voicemail 3. Travis. Businessman voice, the one he uses when he's managing a situation. Hey Cass, it's Travis. Listen, I heard you've been doing well out there. That's great. Seriously, that's really great. I've got something I want to run by you, family thing. Just give me a call back when you get a chance. No big deal. No big deal. 8 years of silence. No big deal. Voicemail 9. Amber. Her voice sounds like someone trying to hold a paper bag together in the rain. Cassidy, it's me. I know it's been, I know. But I really need to talk to you. I'm in a situation and I don't know who else to call. Please just call me back. Please. That please landed somewhere uncomfortable. Not because it moved me towards saying yes. Because I recognized the shape of it. I'd said please to this family in 100 different ways for 22 years, and not once had it changed what happened to me. Voicemail 17. My mother. The voice of a woman who is accustomed to being obeyed. Cassidy. This is your mother. I don't know what you think you've been proving out there, but it's time to stop this. Family doesn't just walk away. We need to talk. Call me back. Family doesn't just walk away. 8 years, 52 calls, and the closest thing to self-awareness she could manage was the implication that I was the one who had done something wrong. Voicemail 29. My father. Raymond Monroe, a man I had watched stay silent through more injustices than I could count, who had chosen comfort over courage every single time it mattered. He said, Cassidy. It's Dad. I don't know what to say. I know I should have called before this. I know I should have called a long time ago. Your sister's in trouble and your mother thinks I should call you and ask for help, and I'm calling. But I want you to know that I know this isn't right. I know this isn't how it should go. That's all I can say right now. That's all I can say. I listened to that one twice. Voicemail 41. Travis again. The businessman voice was gone. Look, Cass. I know we haven't talked in a long time. I know some stuff happened. But Amber's really in a bad way, and Mom is losing her mind, and Dad doesn't know what to do, and I'm stretched thin, and you're clearly doing well, and I need you to remember that we're family. Okay. We're family. We're family. There it was. The Monroe family's answer to everything. The 2 words that were supposed to erase 8 years of silence, 1 inheritance challenge, 1 grandmother's funeral I wasn't called about, 1 Christmas dinner where my ambition was treated like a threat. We're family. As if family were a pre-existing condition that waived all previous behavior. Voicemail 52. Amber. It was 5:47 a.m. She sounded like someone who hadn't slept. Cassidy, I'm sorry for calling so many times. I know how this looks. I know I don't have any right to ask you for anything. I'm scared. I'm really scared. And I know you're the only one who actually has their life together, and I'm asking you to help me, and I know you might say no, and I'm asking anyway. A long pause. I hope you're okay. I think about that sometimes. I hope you've been okay out there. That last part. I think about that sometimes. I hope you've been okay. 8 years. And that was the first acknowledgement from any of them that I was a person who might have an experience worth considering. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that 50-second voicemail. My coffee had gone cold. The morning light was coming through my kitchen window the way Austin morning light does in winter, pale gold, unhurried, the kind of light that makes no promises. I called Priya. She answered on the second ring, voice already alert, because Priya has always answered my calls like she's been waiting for them. My family found me. Oh. A pause. Which part hurts? The part where I'm not surprised. She let that sit. She knew better than to fill my silence with comfort before I was done with it. 8 years, I said. 8 years. And the first time they reach out, 52 calls in one night, and not one. Not one of them says I'm sorry. They say help me. Every single one. 52 variations of the same 2 words. Help me. What do you want to do? I'm going to Brenham in 2 weeks for the gala. I'm not changing that. I'm not rearranging my career because they can't rearrange their behavior. A small pause. Cassidy Monroe. What? Go get them. They escalated when I didn't call back. Day 3 after the voicemails, an email appeared in my work inbox. My professional email. The one on our company's public website. From carol.monroe79 at a Gmail address. After everything this family sacrificed for you, you can't even return a phone call. I raised you. I fed you and clothed you and gave you a roof and you walk away like none of it happened. I have spent 8 years explaining to people in this community that you were going through something difficult, that we were praying for you, that we loved you regardless. And this is how you thank me. Your sister is in real trouble and you're sitting in your fancy apartment pretending we don't exist. I always said you were selfish. I guess I was right. I read it twice. I saved it to a folder I labeled documentation. I did not reply. Day 4. A LinkedIn connection request from Travis with a message attached. Hey, stranger. Looks like you've been killing it. Proud of you. Listen, family stuff going on. Reach out when you can. Also, I've got a business idea I've been sitting on. Would love to pick your brain. Proud of you. After 8 years. Through a LinkedIn message. Along with a request to pick my brain. I saved the screenshot. I did not connect. Day 5. Amber texted my personal cell number, a number she hadn't had. Meaning someone had tracked it down. The text was long, the kind you can tell someone has drafted and deleted and redrafted multiple times because the punctuation keeps changing mid-sentence. Cassidy, I found your number through Shelby Pierce from high school. I hope that's okay. I'm sorry to text out of nowhere. I know I have absolutely no right to ask you for anything. I know I was not a good sister. I know I didn't defend you when I should have, and I know I let Mom tell stories about you that weren't true, and I said nothing. I know all of that. But I am losing my house and I am alone and I am terrified and you are the only person I know who has actually built something and I am asking you to please co-sign this loan. I will pay it back. I swear. Please. I put my phone down. Picked it up. Put it back down. Then I screenshotted it, added it to my documentation folder, and set my phone on my desk for the rest of the day. Priya asked me that evening, "How are you doing with all of this?" I thought about it for a long time before answering. "I'm not angry," I said finally. "I'm just clear. I've been angry for years. I spent a lot of therapy money getting from angry to clear. And being clear it's quieter. It's quieter than angry." Clear about what? That I'm not a cosigner. I'm not alone. I'm not an ATM that they can find the PIN to now that I've got a title next to my name. I'm a person who didn't exist in this family's world for 8 years and can't be retroactively recruited into it now because the math stopped working. Priya said, "Yeah, just that." Yeah. Sometimes the right response to something true is just to agree with it. Deborah texted me 4 days before the gala. "They know you're the keynote speaker. Your mother found out through the event program. She saw your name and your photo and she's been on the phone with everyone in her address book since this morning. They're planning to be there, Cassidy. All of them. Be ready." I put my phone in my desk drawer and sat in my office for 20 minutes, staring at the wall. Then I went back to my keynote notes and read them from the beginning. And I was ready. I flew into Houston on March 13th and drove northwest on I-10 in a rental car that smelled like rental cars always smell, vaguely synthetic, vaguely optimistic. The Texas Hill Country in March is just starting to consider blooming. The bluebonnets weren't out yet, but you could feel them underground deciding. The drive to Brenham takes about an hour and 45 from Houston. I made it in silence. No music. Just the sound of the road and my own breathing and the occasional weather alert on the rental car's radio that I didn't pay attention to. Brenham looked exactly the same. This is the thing about small towns that leaves a particular kind of mark on people who grew up in them. They are insistently, almost defiantly unchanged. The same Dairy Queen on the main road. The same gas station with the misspelled sign that someone should have fixed in 2009. The same white steeple of First Baptist poking up above the tree line like it's pointing at something. I checked into a hotel outside of town. Not the local bed and breakfast, which would have meant running into someone who knew someone before I'd even unpacked. A chain hotel off the highway. Anonymous. Efficient. Mine. The gala was the following evening at the Brenham Civic Center, a building I had been inside approximately 400 times as a child and teenager. For everything from middle school band concerts to my father's company retirement parties to the Christmas bazaar my mother organized for years with the focused energy of someone running a military operation. I arrived through the venue's side entrance as the keynote speaker at 6:45 p.m. The event began at 7. I was wearing a charcoal gray blazer over a white blouse. My hair was down. My speaker badge said, Cassidy Monroe, Director of Strategic Operations, Strata Advisory, Keynote Speaker. A volunteer at the registration table, a woman maybe 15 years older than me, someone I half recognized from the church choir, looked at my badge and smiled. Miss Monroe, welcome. We are so honored to have you. Congressman Will Hite is very excited to introduce you. I smiled. I said thank you. I moved toward the speaker's prep area. Through the main hall doorway, I could see the room filling up. Round tables of 8, white tablecloths, centerpieces with Texas wildflowers and little LED votives. A banner across the stage, Brazos County Community Forward, building a better tomorrow together. About 250 seats, most of them already occupied. At the center table, directly in my sight line from the doorway, in a blue dress and a statement necklace I recognized from a decade ago. Carol Monroe. And beside her, Raymond. And across the table, Travis with his fiancée. And Amber, in a dress that didn't quite fit the occasion, like she'd grabbed the first thing that looked acceptable and hoped no one noticed. And there, near the edge of the table, scrolling his phone. My brother Travis's friend from high school. And Kyle. Wait, no, not Kyle. This family had no Kyle. This was Travis's college roommate, brought as the family's version of backup. My family. 8 years of silence sitting at a table 60 feet away from the side door I was standing beside. Carol hadn't seen me yet. She was laughing at something the woman beside her had said, head tilted back, the performance of delight that I had watched her execute 1,000 times. The laugh that says, look at how well I'm doing. Look at how good things are. I turned back toward the speaker area and breathed. The MC, a local city councilwoman named Patricia Tran, found me backstage and said all the right things. Thank you for coming all this way. We've been following Strata Advisory's work for years. Your bio is remarkable. I thanked her. I listened to the opening remarks from my spot behind the curtain. I listened to the donor recognition. I listened to the video presentation about the county's community development goals. And then Patricia Tran stepped to the podium. Our keynote speaker tonight has built her career from the ground up, starting as a receptionist at a small consulting firm and rising to director of strategic operations of one of the most impactful community development firms in the state of Texas. Her work has touched the lives of over 40,000 families across Texas and the Southwest. She was recently featured in the Texas Business Journal's Women in Leadership series and has spoken at national conferences on community equity and small business development. Please welcome, from Strata Advisory, and I am told, a Brenham native, Cassidy Monroe. 250 people stood up. I walked out from behind the curtain and into the spotlight, and for 3 seconds, just 3, I was 22 years old again, standing in my mother's living room while she told 15 of our relatives that I was unstable. Then the applause settled me back into my body. I looked out at the crowd. 250 faces. Some of them were faces I'd known since elementary school. Mrs. Garrett, who had taught me 4th grade math and let me stay in at recess when things at home were particularly loud. Coach Daniels from the high school. The woman who ran the pharmacy on Main Street. Faces that had been told a story about me for 8 years by a woman who was very good at telling stories. And at the center table, for faces I knew better than any others, Carol Monroe's smile had disappeared. Not in the dramatic way you might imagine, not a gasp, not a visible recoil. It just evacuated, like someone had quietly turned a light off behind her eyes. What replaced it was the expression I had seen on her face exactly twice before, on occasions I will not describe in detail here. The expression of someone watching a story they have been telling for years catch fire in their own hands. Her fingers gripped the edge of the tablecloth. Raymond set his water glass down and it splashed slightly on the linen, and he didn't even look at it. He was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen from him before. Something that wasn't quite grief, but lived in the same neighborhood. Amber's hand went to her chest. Her mouth moved. Maybe my name. Maybe just air. Travis's fork hovered between his plate and his face for an identifiable moment before he set it down very deliberately. 250 people were on their feet. My family sat frozen in the center of all that standing. I let the applause run for a few seconds. Then I adjusted the microphone and began. I gave them the keynote they came for. 22 minutes on community development strategy, grant structures, public-private partnership models, case studies from Austin and San Antonio. I gave them data. I gave them frameworks. I gave them the professional substance that had earned me the invitation to stand at this particular podium in this particular room. And then, near the end, I shifted. I want to take a minute to talk about something more personal, I said, because I think it's relevant to the work you're doing here tonight. The room went slightly different. That particular quality of silence that happens when an audience collectively decides to pay a different kind of attention. I grew up in this town, I said. Some of you know me. Some of you knew a version of me that was incomplete. I left Brenham 8 years ago with a few $100s and a bus ticket and a goal I hadn't told anyone about yet, because the people I might have told had made it clear that my goals didn't deserve airtime. A murmur. The kind that starts in one corner and moves. I was told I was unstable. I was told I wasn't going anywhere. I was told in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different rooms, that the version of my future I could see wasn't available to me. I paused. The work I do now, helping communities access resources, build infrastructure, create pathways for people who don't have obvious ones, it started because someone looked at me and saw a person instead of a problem. That's community development. That's the thing underneath all the grant structures and the data. It's someone deciding that what another person has to offer is worth investing in before they've had a chance to prove it. I stopped, looked out at the room. I'm back in Brenham tonight because someone believed that story was worth telling at a community fundraiser. I think they were right. I hope you do too. I didn't say my mother's name. I didn't look at her table. I didn't have to. Mrs. Garrett, who had let me stay in at recess on hard days, was pressing her fingers to her mouth. The man beside her, her husband, I think, had turned and was looking at the center table with an expression that told me he'd made a connection. I could watch the connection moving through the room like weather, like the way a cloud shadow crosses a field. That's Diane's Carol's, that's her daughter. She said she was in it, she's a director. She was in the paper. When I finished, the room stood again. Longer than before. Some people were crying. The woman who ran the pharmacy on Main Street was crying. Coach Daniels was not crying, but he was holding himself very carefully, the way athletic people hold themselves when they're trying not to. My mother did not stand. She sat in the center of 250 standing people, perfectly still, her napkin balled in both fists, her face the particular color and expression of someone whose story has just been publicly and permanently revised without their permission. The networking reception was supposed to be wine and small talk. It became something else. I stepped off the stage and into a receiving line that formed without anyone organizing it. People I'd known for different lengths of time for different reasons. People who touched my arm and said things like your grandmother would be so proud and we had no idea and I'm sorry we didn't know more and thank you for coming back. Mrs. Garrett wrapped her arms around me and I felt her whole small body shaking slightly with what I think was a kind of delayed reckoning with things she'd heard and half believed. I was in the middle of a conversation with a county commissioner who wanted to discuss a potential partnership when I felt the shift in the air behind me. The particular atmospheric change that a person raised in the presence of a certain kind of person learns to identify without looking. Carol Monroe arrived at my shoulder with a smile so architecturally precise it looked bolted to her face. Sweetheart. Arms opening. The hug offered for the room. What a wonderful surprise. Why didn't you tell us you were coming? 20 people within earshot. She wasn't making a scene. She was giving a performance. I didn't step into the hug. You had my number, Mom. I said it quietly, without edge, without drama. 8 years of it. The smile held. Her voice dropped to something designed to not carry past the two of us. That speech of yours made this very uncomfortable for the family. I didn't name anyone. I matched her volume precisely. If people drew their own conclusions, that's their process. Amber appeared at Carol's shoulder. Dressed in the not quite right outfit, eyes reddened at the edges. Cassidy. We've been trying to reach you. I heard your voicemails, Amber. All 52. Not one apology. Just help me. I held her gaze. Help me is not the same sentence as I'm sorry. And I'm not able to respond to one as though it were the other. Raymond materialized behind them. His voice was low, aimed at the floor. Cassidy, let's not do this here. Dad. I looked at him. The man who had sat in his recliner and stared at the carpet and said nothing, at every gathering where saying something would have cost him more than comfort. You had 8 years to not do this here. You chose not to. Travis, from further back. You think you're better than us now? No. I straightened my blazer. I think I'm done being less than you needed me to be. I nodded once to Congressman Wilhite, who had appeared near the stage with the expression of someone who has walked into a scene mid-act and is trying to assess the blocking. Then I turned and walked toward the exit. Even steps. Not fast. Not slow. I had done enough walking out of rooms in my life to know the difference between leaving and fleeing. I was leaving. That's different. I sat in my rental car in the Civic Center parking lot for 23 minutes. Engine off. Hands on the wheel. The March night was 61 degrees and there were cars pulling out around me, and through the plate glass windows of the Civic Center I could see people standing in clusters, faces angled toward the door I'd just walked through, the Whisper network running at full speed. By tomorrow morning, every kitchen table in Brenham would have a version of Tonight on it. I knew that. I'd grown up in a town where information moved faster than the news. I also knew something: those kitchen table conversations didn't change. The story they were revising was one my mother had told for 8 years. And the new one didn't need her permission to spread. It spread because it was true. I called Priya. It's done, I said. I said what I needed to say. How do you feel? I thought about it for a real moment. Not a rhetorical one. Like I'm 31 years old for the first time. She laughed. I almost did too. Then I drove to my hotel, ordered room service, and sat at the desk with my laptop open. And I wrote an email. To Carol Monroe, Raymond Monroe, Travis Monroe, Amber Monroe. I'm writing this once, so I want to be clear. I am not co-signing any loan. I am not funding a business idea. I am not sending money or providing financial backing of any kind to any member of this family. Not because I can't. Because I won't. The difference matters. I am not angry. I want to be specific about that. Anger took a lot of years and a lot of therapy to get past. What I am now is clear. And clarity is much harder to argue with than anger. If anyone in this family wants a real relationship with me, not a financial one, not a strategic one, not a cosigner relationship, I am open to that. But it doesn't start with a voicemail asking for help. It doesn't start with a LinkedIn message. It doesn't start with family is family, or we did our best, or that's in the past. It starts with a conversation where someone says what happened. Out loud. Specifically. The fund. The voicemails with no apology. The 8 years of telling Brenham Baptist I was in a facility. The inheritance challenge. All of it. Acknowledged. Named. Not generalized into mistakes were made, actually named. If that conversation happens, I'm willing to have the next one. Until it does, I wish you all well. My answer is no. Cassidy. I read it 3 times. Changed nothing. Press send. Then I closed my laptop, turned off the lamp, and lay in a hotel bed 12 miles from the house I grew up in, listening to Texas quiet. No music. No voices. Just the particular sound of a night that owes you nothing and isn't pretending otherwise. It was the best silence I'd ever heard. The morning after the gala, I had a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. Then I checked, it was a Brenham area code, not my family's specific exchanges. I called back. It was Mr. Robert Fenwick, my grandmother's lawyer. 83 now. He'd seen the Business Journal article when it came out months earlier and had been meaning to call. He'd heard about the gala from his daughter, who attended. Your grandmother, he said, would have found a way to be in that room last night. I don't doubt it for a second. I said, I know. He said, she came to me specifically because she didn't trust that money to get to you through your mother. She made me promise to hold those original documents indefinitely. I still have them. A pause. I'm sorry I couldn't do more at the time. I said, you did what she asked. That's what she needed you to do. After I hung up, I sat with the call for a while. Loretta Monroe, who spent her whole life in rooms that tried to make her smaller, who stayed when she wanted to leave, who kept her real feelings in letters folded into boxes. She had done the one thing she could do for me. She'd built a door I could walk through. And she'd made sure the right person had the key. I went back to Austin that afternoon. Within 10 days of the gala, Brenham had made up its mind. Deborah reported to me in our now weekly phone calls the way a good journalist reports. Factual, careful, not unsympathetic to any side. The Monroe family story had been the dominant conversation at every diner table and pharmacy counter and church foyer in town for the week following the event. Not as gossip exactly. More like a collective reconsideration. The photo of me at the podium, taken by the Brazos County Courier staff photographer, had run in the local paper under the headline, Brenham Native Returns as Keynote Speaker for Community Forward Gala. The article mentioned my title and the firm's work and included a quote from Congressman Will Hite about the value of community investment. It did not mention my family. It didn't have to. The room had been full of people who could connect those particular dots. Mrs. Garrett told her book club. The woman from the pharmacy told her sister, who went to First Baptist. The First Baptist connection meant the story reached the exact same prayer chain that had been praying for me, by name, specifically based on my mother's 8-year implication that I was in crisis. Deborah told me the conversation at First Baptist's Wednesday fellowship supper had been. She said Cassidy was in a facility. Cassidy was giving keynote speeches at civic events. Which one of those things do we think is true? My mother resigned her position on the Community Forward Gala Decorating Committee. She issued a public statement, a Facebook post that said she was stepping back to focus on family during a difficult season. The irony was so dense it was almost structural. Congressman Will Hite called Pauline Adie's office and requested a formal meeting about a potential state-level partnership. Pauline forwarded me the email with a gif of someone opening a door. Raymond Monroe sent me a letter. Not an email. A letter. In an envelope, with his handwriting on the front, the careful, slightly slanted script of a man who had been taught to write properly and hadn't done it in a while. I opened it at my desk on a Tuesday morning with my office door closed. Cassidy, I don't know how much right I have to write this. But I'm writing it anyway because not writing it has been costing me more than I can afford at my age. I'm sorry. Not for your mother. She has to find her own way to that word. For me. For every time I sat in that room and said nothing. For every time I knew something was wrong and I convinced myself that keeping the peace was the same as keeping the family. It wasn't. I was keeping my comfort. I was keeping my position in a house where the price of comfort was someone else's diminishment. You. Always you. You deserved a father who picked you. Not a father who picked the path of least resistance and told himself it was wisdom. I was afraid of her. I'm not proud of that. But it's the truth. You stood on that stage and I sat in that chair and I understood, maybe for the first time, what I had done by sitting in chairs for 30 years while she rewrote you. I don't expect anything. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that I know. Dad. I read it twice. I put it in my desk drawer. I didn't respond. Not yet. Maybe not at all. Maybe eventually. I let the decision take whatever shape it needed to take, and I didn't rush it in either direction. It was the first apology I had received from anyone in the Monroe family. From the person I had expected it from last. 3 months after the gala, Portland. Wait, Austin. It's important to get cities right when you're telling true stories. 3 months after the gala, Austin. A Sunday evening in June. I am standing in my kitchen, in my apartment, that I own, stirring pasta while Priya argues with my neighbor Marcus about whether you're allowed to put hot sauce on macaroni and cheese. You are. This is not controversial. Marcus is wrong and he knows it. Paulina Dees is on my couch with a glass of Malbec, telling a story about a grant meeting that went off the rails in the most spectacular fashion. 2 of my analysts from work are setting the dining table I bought at an estate sale in East Austin Oak, 6 chairs, in perfectly beautiful mine. This is my Sunday dinner. Every week, more or less. These people, more or less. No obligation. No performance. No one here because my name appeared on a loan application. Everyone here because we chose each other on purpose. I look around the table when we sit down. I think about another table longer, set with better china, in a house in a town 60 miles from where I sit right now, where I was furniture. Where I was the cautionary tale and the wallpaper and the person who cleaned up while everybody else toasted. This table is smaller. The wine is $14 a bottle. The pasta is from a recipe I learned from a YouTube video at 2 in the morning during my second year in Austin when I was trying to teach myself to cook properly because I couldn't afford to eat out. I have never felt more present in my life. Amber texted me 4 weeks after the gala. 1 sentence. I'm sorry I didn't defend you. I'm sorry I didn't say anything. I know that's not enough. I just needed to say it. I read it. I put my phone down. I picked it back up. I typed, thank you. That meant something. I haven't called her yet. I might. I'm letting that unfold at whatever speed it needs to unfold at, without pressure in either direction. The door isn't locked. But it isn't propped open either. It's just there, with a knock required, and I'm listening for something more than 2 words before I answer it. Travis hasn't reached out since the gala. I don't expect him to. My mother hasn't contacted me since my email. I don't expect her to either. Not an apology, I genuinely don't expect that. Carol Monroe's relationship with accountability is too complicated and too protected for me to expect anything from it at my age. I've made my peace with that particular absence. It took years of work and it cost something. But I made it. Deborah and I talk every Sunday. Slowly, carefully, the way you build something that has to hold weight over time. Trust isn't a switch you flip because someone's finally being honest. But it's a thing you can build. If both people are willing to do the work of building it. I'm willing. She's willing. We'll see what we end up with. I want to say something directly to you. If you've made it this far, you deserve a direct conversation. If you recognize anything in this story, the table where you were invisible, the family that called you unstable when you were actually just inconvenient, the voicemails that come only when someone needs something, the narrative that got written about your life by people who couldn't afford to let you have one of your own, hear this. You are not crazy. You are not ungrateful. You are not selfish. Those words, the ones they reach for when you stop shrinking to fit the shape they need you to be, those words are the sound of people losing control of a story they never had the right to tell about you in the first place. The 2 words my family left in 52 voicemails were help me. The 2 words I needed to hear first were I'm sorry. Those are not the same sentence. They have never been the same sentence. And you do not owe anyone the first until they've given you the second. Not because you're keeping score. Not because you're cold. Because genuine relationship. Not because you're cold. Because genuine relationship, the kind worth having, doesn't begin with a transaction. It begins with accountability. And accountability begins with someone saying, out loud, what they actually did. I used to believe that family meant showing up no matter what. That loyalty meant swallowing your voice so everyone else could eat in peace. That the measure of a good daughter was how little space she took up. I know better now. Family is a choice. Real family, the kind worth keeping, chooses you on purpose. Not out of obligation. Not because you're useful. Not because you showed up on a loan application at the right moment. Because they looked at who you actually are and decided, yes, that person. I choose that person. Loretta Monroe chose me. Deliberately. Quietly. Across years and distance and a family structure designed to make sure the right people benefited and the wrong ones didn't. She put $42,000 in a legally ironclad account and told her attorney to contact me directly, and she did it because she knew that a house where one person's dreams are treated as threats is not a home. It's a management system. She couldn't say that out loud under her daughter-in-law's roof, but she said it where it counted. And it reached me. I named a scholarship for her. The Loretta Monroe Emerging Leaders Award, administered through the University of Texas at Austin's Business School, funded annually from my own salary, for first-generation college students who are financially independent from their families. Not because their families can't contribute, but because their families won't. The scholarship fund published the announcement on the UT website with a photograph, me at 6 years old, gap-toothed, grinning, with Loretta's hands on my shoulders and her smile behind mine. The announcement made it to Brenham through the internet, the way everything eventually makes it to everywhere. I heard from Deborah that my mother saw it. I don't know what she said when she did. I don't need to. I named the scholarship. The scholarship exists. Students who look like what I looked like at 22 are going to receive it. That's Loretta's money, finally going where she always intended it to go. That's the ending she wanted to write and couldn't. I wrote it for her. My name is Cassidy Monroe. I'm 31 years old. I live in Austin, Texas, in a home I own, with a career I built and a found family that has never once required me to be smaller than I actually am. The most valuable thing in my life isn't the title or the salary or the apartment or even the scholarship. It's the knowledge, the bone-deep, hard-won, therapy-assisted, midnight-in-a-parking-lot knowledge that leaving was not the failure. Leaving was the beginning. The bravest thing I ever did was not walking out that door in the middle of a Texas December with $300 and a duffel bag. The bravest thing was not walking back in when they finally called. Not until they had something more to offer than 2 words that weren't an apology. If you're still sitting at a table where no one sees you, if you're the family ghost who does the dishes while everyone else makes the toasts, if you've been told so many times that you're the problem that you've started to believe the evidence is your own face. I hope this story gave you something. Even if it's just the permission to say no. Even if it's just the knowledge that someone somewhere has been where you are and built something anyway. Sometimes all you need is one person who asks the right question. Cassidy, what do you want? I know what I want now. And I got it. 1 alarm clock, 1 spreadsheet, 1 deliberate choice at a time. You can too. My grandmother Loretta told me once, the quietest person in the room is usually the one paying the most attention. She was right. I was paying attention my whole life. I just didn't know yet that what I was paying for would eventually pay me back. It did.